it was April of 2023. I simply just was not feeling good. I thought maybe I caught a bug. And then as time went on, I was retaining a lot of fluid. I just kept blowing up, having a hard time breathing. Again, a couple of days went by. I just thought it was a bug. It would pass. And then all of a sudden I broke out with a rash. I went to the emergency room. They ended up doing a swab, even though I didn't have a sore throat, but I ended up with strep A and a scarlet fever, and which they thought was weird for my age. So they were treating me for that. I was going through all kinds of tests over during the course of weeks, because they were concerned about your organs, which scarlet fever attacks. Things were, coming back okay, what have you, but I still was just swelling up. I put like 60 pounds of fluid on. The fluid was just unbelievable. I couldn't even walk. I was so swollen. But I never had a fever until one day. Oh, and then a week after that, they put me on an antibiotic for the scarlet fever. A week after that, I broke out with another rash. I went back to the emergency room, and they told me, nope, this is the scarlet fever rash. The first one they now they were attributing it to just a viral rash. But this one, the second one, was more like sandpaper. But anyway, so they wanted to do they wanted to check something, but I couldn't lay flat. Every time I laid flat, I couldn't breathe. And then they put me in emergency because my blood pressure kept dropping. And then what ended up happening was I ended up having cardiac arrest. My body just couldn't take it anymore, is the explanation they gave me. They were able then to do a biopsy, and that's when they found my lymphoma. They intubated me and then transported me to Mass General, where Dr. Jane took over at that point. Thank God. And then my family was they didn't know what to do. I honestly, when I was conscious, I had no idea what was going on. I just couldn't understand why no one could figure out what was wrong with me. I just felt horrible. But again, I had no fever, and it wasn't until I broke a fever, and then my cardiologist said, "I want you in the hospital." That's when he admitted me. But he admitted me to a community hospital here, and they're the ones that just couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So that's when they shipped me to Mass General. But my family, it was tough because it's not the unknown. Not knowing what was wrong was hard. And then, having me intubated and my husband witnessing the cardiac arrest, it sent them all in a tailspin, pretty much. One of the things that everyone needs an advocate. You need an advocate. If you don't have a family member that can advocate for you, because in my case, I was just too sick to advocate for myself. I believed everything that they told me. I just went with it, and I just wasn't in my right mind. I just was so sick. I just wanted to get better. And my family is the one who, they're the ones that kept pushing and pushing and pushing. So an advocate for someone is so important. You have to find that one person that you totally trust. And then again, being intubated and not being able to speak for myself, I really needed an advocate. So my husband was great, my family. I was fortunate enough to have a lot of family around me, and a husband who just wasn't going to give up. So he just kept pushing for answers. But everyone, they were kind. I mean, the hospital staff, they were great. I mean, they were just as curious as I was of what was going on. So, but it wasn't until I got into Dr. Jane's care that I started to see differences. I started getting better because the care team that was there was just, they were just stupendous. They were great. I can't say, and I haven't found a single person that didn't help in some way. I was a procrastinator in my past life. Definitely a procrastinator. Again, it's a bug, it'll pass. It's a virus, it'll pass, and I put my job first. I had a job. I was a childcare provider. I didn't want to disrupt my kids' lives and schedules and calling in sick, and so I put everything on hold, and it was hard getting appointments at night, and weekends were out of the question. So I was a procrastinator. I'm no longer a procrastinator. I question everything, which I think you have to. You have to question everything. It may sound like a silly question, but you'd be surprised that some of them really aren't silly at all. We always say, I don't want to ask a dumb question. No question's dumb. When it comes to your health, no question's dumb. Just ask it because someone else has experienced it. The nurses, the nurse practitioners, the techs, they were great. I mean, it was a learning process, but it's changed. I'm here. I'm here. I see commercials on TV of people with the same lymphoma that I had, and they're not here. They didn't make it, and it was quick. So I have to thank my team for that, my care team. I trusted them, and I'm still in remission, so I still see them quite often. But I keep thinking about when I make that 5-year mark and I don't have to go in as often or at all. That's scary in a sense, so it's nice to have people around you that understand. That it can change, that day to day, it's just different. It's, one day I felt like, I had the bull by the horns, and the next day I felt miserable and horrible. There's a lot of, you have to depend on it. I'm not one that had to depend on people. I never wanted to depend on anyone. But when you're sick and just not feeling well, and the chemo treatments, the first set of chemo I had, I did great. It was the second set of chemo that I had when I was going for my stem cell transplant. That chemo did me in. That was a rough haul, but it was quick. It passed. The nurses, the staff, my care team, they did everything they could to make me more comfortable. Everything. I ended up in ICU. I was only supposed to be in for 4 weeks. I ended up in the ICU for an additional 2 weeks through the holidays. It was miserable, but they got me through it. They all got me through it. So it was nice to have a handhold. But people need to understand that it's day to day. Every day was different. You had good days, you had bad days, but you had to just accept them. If you're tired, lay down, rest, stop. You've got to accept that. You can't just keep plowing through. It doesn't work that way. In the beginning, I couldn't walk. After my first hospital stay, I couldn't walk. I was on a walker. I felt like I had dinosaur feet. But again, I had to keep going. And as miserable as it was sometimes, I had to keep trying and trying and trying. But it was nice. Like I said, depending upon people asking questions, a lot of questions.